What do you do when a rival rewrites the rules? Welcome to the call. I'm Jay Sapsford. China's exports are on track to hit a record $1 trillion this year. And imports? Well, China is importing as little as possible. Instead, Beijing is exploiting its dominance of supply chains to the point of becoming a U.S. national security concern. All of which raises a question: how best to meet this China challenge? Our guest today is a veteran of Washington and of the rough and tumble of Chicago politics. But he also spent years as our ambassador to Japan and has deep insights into the role of allies in containing China. Ambassador Rahm Emanuel, welcome to the call.
Thank you. How are you?
Well, thank you. And given the years you spent in Tokyo, I'm really anxious to know, looking at China through the eyes of that alliance, how do you assess the threat today, both militarily and economically? Let's start with that.
Well, first of all, the alliance, Japan is the long pole for the United States in the Indo-Pacific on both political, military, economic. Japan's going to be the long pole and the critical ally for the United States, in which we organize our other alliances, whether with Australia, New Zealand, India, South Korea, Philippines. That's going to be a crucial partnership. Second is, getting back to, I think, the core question, and you could take this any way, was you said militarily. As you know, you and I are talking right now, the Prime Minister articulated something that's not new about Taiwan and the threat and what it means to Japan. But the good news for the United States is we always assumed Japan would step up. They never articulated. This is the first time it's been said out and open. I'm critical of the administration. They haven't embraced it because I think that's a good thing, leaving Japan on their own, which is not a good thing for us. Second, economically or politically, when you look at, if you wanted to do something as we did during the Biden administration on chips and kind of restrictions to China, Korea, Japan, Taiwan, the Dutch are crucial for us. We cannot have basic export controls if those allies are not aligned. So Japan is central in a series of things, and also politically and organizing. And I would say, although the United States in the region brings a lot of hard power, Japan in the region, into the Indo-Pacific, is the single most popular country across abroad. So they bring a huge amount of soft power that aids and assists the United States as we work with other countries in the ASEAN network.
Now, you've said that China has gone from a competitor to an adversary. One of our members is asking, we noticed that in the administration's national security strategy, they use the word competitor again. I wonder if you can get to what you mean in that distinction.
Look,
Please, go
yeah,
ahead.
no, I don't mean to jump ahead, and sorry for that. But I do think they were a competitor. I think in 2012, when Chairman Xi becomes head of both the party and China, he makes a decision post our financial meltdown. It's been written about that the United States is basically best days are behind it, and more importantly, that this is the time for China to move and become an adversary and not a competitor, and not basically concede ground to the United States. And that changes a whole series of interactions with the United States. I think the administration, I think also the United States as a whole, both parties bear some responsibility. We were slow to the risk that China posed on the military side, on the economic side, and on the challenge. And that means, and I don't like the Cold War metaphor, but as an anecdote, but I think to illustrate this, to tease this out, China's made a decision on quantum computing, AI, life, on biotech, et cetera, across the field, fusion. They are going to compete, win, and bury the United States. I think what we're doing dangerously with our research network and universities across the country with the federal government is a unilateral disarmament. They don't plan in that area to compete. They plan on superseding us. And we have to be cognizant of that. That is that is one of the areas where the battlefield is. That is not a competition. The second thing is, when I say a competition versus adversary, China regularly practices intellectual property theft and economic espionage. We do not. We do not steal their patents. They steal ours, as saw with Google just 2 years ago when it came to AI. When it come to ASML stealing their technology is related to the laser and making chips. So to me, that's not a competitor. That's an adversary. And those are points or examples of how to illustrate the mind shift. And we have to, in my view, accept that as a fact and then deal with it appropriately through the policy and other type of channels that understand and appreciate how they have changed.
So, pivoting here to the security sphere, on the screen is a map of U.S. forces across the Pacific, and you see the players here. You see Japan, Korea, Australia, the Philippines. Together, they make up a dense network that's been the backbone of American deterrence for decades. It seems to me that you have to have these alliances to make this containment work. How is the state of our alliances right now?
Yeah. Well, right now, not good. Was and always need to be strengthened. So you put that there. Let's also understand one thing. China wants basic strategy. Don't make it overcomplicated. They are a rising power. The United States is declining power. You either get in line or you're going to get all the coercion that they have, military, economic, and political. Our posture and position, we are a permanent Pacific power and presence, and you can bet long on the United States. Now, I think the United States is, at this point doesn't believe in alliances. That makes us weaker. We are not going to confront China from Long Beach, California. We're lucky, we're using that map, that we are fully present, and they know that. The more secure our allies are, the greater risk they will take to be aligned with the United States. The more insecure they are with the relationship, the less willing to do that. Now, take Taiwan. You got the Philippines on one end and Okinawa Island chain on the other. One of the key strategies that China has, or possibly dealing with Taiwan, will be a quarantine. That quarantine becomes much more difficult given the relationship between the Philippines geographically and the Okinawa Islands of Japan. That limits one of the choices. It could be a military kinetic operation. It could be a quarantine operation. It could be taking some of the fewer islands that are closer to the mainland and testing the United States. By having those allies willingly operating alongside with the United States, understanding the strategic challenge, you can minimize the effect of that quarantine as an option for China dealing with Taiwan. I think we have done of recent. I think and this is, you'll take it for what it is. You know who I am. I think the administration has made our allies insecure, and by making them insecure, it has made the area much more risky, and it has made and diminished America's reach and strategic power and presence. Our allies are a force multiplier in multiple ways.
So, one of our members is asking a question that touches exactly on this point here. If the PRC aggresses a Taiwan, Philippine, or Japan, can the United States respond quick enough with enough naval and air capabilities to deter or repel an attack? As I think they're speaking to the speed of our response here,
Yeah.
and the
Look,
politics plays into this, obviously.
without getting too not too technical, but look, anything that deals with Taiwan from a China perspective is going to be both space and all the way down underwater and everything between. In different areas, we're stronger than they are. In different areas, they're stronger. They're gaining the head on us. Second, their strategy is rapid, 96 hours. Our strategy is 90 days. Draw it out. The Taiwan Strait, which is, I think, the journal did the other day, I think it was that, it shows you how complicated from topography and other areas it is to move that. Lastly, I'll say this. If you're doing this by, obviously, naval will be a core component. If you go through China's history, they've never fought a naval war. Never. There's no memory, brain cell tradition of a naval capacity in China. So there's some advantages the United States has. On the other hand, if it is a 96 hours, or rather a 90 days versus 96 hours, our ability to supply and our ability to move resources and our ability to keep the military industrial capacity fully stocked and capable to do that is limited. We basically let our guard down after the end of the Cold War. Peace dividend. All of us did it. All of us participated. Now we got to get our stuff together and make sure that we have the most of this time so that our deterrence level is capable of making sure that China thinks twice before they do something.
My history lessons of China are serving me well. I think one Chinese emperor actually pulled back from the sea, thinking that we have everything we need here in China. One of our members is asking, how can the U.S. better engage Southeast Asia in dealing with the China challenge?
Well, you got to, first of all, I mean, you got to be a good neighbor. And you got to engage with them politically and strategically and understand their interests. They have they all the region, as I said, and some of them both ally and friends. They do not want. They know better than us. They do not want an untethered, unhinged China. America is that check. Now, it should not be only because of the young men and women operating out of Okinawa, uh, other parts of Japan, or on Korea. We should bring our soft power, which is very popular in baseball in Japan. NBA is the most popular sport in China. Other parts of our movies and music industry, very popular in Korea and other parts of the world. We should bring, as we did, the U.S., Japan, South Korea trilateral, the U.S., Japan, Philippines trilateral, the Quad, as we did between India, Australia, Japan, and the United States. The president of the United States has broken a 35-year strategy of bringing India into the U.S. orbit. We were really, really close. And for whatever relationship him and his kids have with Pakistan, we have irritated and ruined the India relationship, which was an incredible check on China from the other side of the Indo-Pacific, the Indo part of the Indo-Pacific. So to me, that's the political side. Then there's the economic engagement. The United States market is a great opportunity to keep those countries. Now, here's what China's doing. China is making the world dependent on China and China independent of the world. Our strategy is to make us interconnected. And we should be luring our friends, allies, not just in that region, but around the world into a greater sense of collaboration, cooperation, and integration with the United States as this benchmark of China having $1 trillion of export capacity, making sure that you can trade with China, but China can dominate you economically. They are trying to be independent of the world, but the world dependent on them. That is a threat to the rest of the world, and we should be stepping into that because it is a huge opportunity for the United States. And none of those economically, politically, or strategically, or militarily are we doing.
Along with China making the rest of the world dependent on its
Yeah.
economic activity, one of the things that it's doing is developing these choke points, and it's shown in recent weeks that it's willing to use those. Didn't they learn this from us? I mean, we have dominated the financial
Good.
system around the world for
I,
decades.
I disagree with you on one thing.
Okay.
You said we have recently seen. I wrote when I was ambassador, we issued a report about China's practices of coercion. Back in 2010, 15 years ago, or yeah, 2010, Japan was a victim of China's economic coercion around critical minerals. It was 15 years ago now, and we knew about it, and we didn't do anything. They did that to Korea when we deployed the THAAD. They did it to Australia when they raised questions about COVID and its origin. They did it to Lithuania when they had opened up a political relationship with Taiwan. They did it to the Philippines. So this is not new. Now, we may all of a sudden paying attention because we've discovered we're vulnerable too. But the idea that China is going to use political, military, and economic coercion to coerce to basically destroy your sovereignty, that's not new.
Yeah, but Rob, the question still stands, though. I mean, the United States also has its choke points, particularly in the financial sector. We used those to gather intelligence after 9/11, and then that led to, increased use of sanctions. We started using sanctions instead of doing military activity, instead of doing it along with military activity. Didn't the
Correct.
Chinese learn that from us?
No, I mean, China, in this sense, we use, yes, sanctions, but that doesn't mean just for us. If you've done something like Russia did on Ukraine, we use sanctions to penalize Russia for what they did to Ukraine. China uses it to destroy your sovereignty. And when it's directly a threat to them, we have used our political military power on behalf of others, on behalf of a set of ideas and values until this administration. So, yes, they have learned one thing, but the tactic is not deployed the same way, and there's no moral equivalency on that, Jay.
I'm going to ask my producer, Scott, to throw up a chart here that shows the strain on the U.S. finances at the moment. We now are spending more on debt service than we are on defense.
Yeah.
This is something that has caused alarm among many of the pundits around the world who say that this is a sign that an empire is getting overextended. I wonder what your thoughts are on this.
If I'm not mistaken, this point was originally brought up by Neil Ferguson, who
He
brought,
actually, yeah, he popularized it. It goes
right.
back to Adam Ferguson in the 18th century, an earlier
Well,
Ferguson. They're
Lisa,
unrelated too, by the way.
how
But
about that point was brought up by Mr. Ferguson, and you can decide whether it's Neil or Adam.
okay, gotcha.
I'm just teasing, but I actually think, and I've thought about this and give you an idea. I grew up in the politics of Graham Rudman on deficit reduction, and the notion of trying to force kind of fiscal discipline.
Right.
So an idea that I've been toying with using that fact is that at no time, basically pass a binding resolution signed by the president that at no time can the national debt supersede the national defense.
Hmm.
And it would create a internal discipline system. One can be motivated by the debt, or one can be motivated by the defense spending, but bringing those two impulses together into a singular effort that forces a set of decisions both on spending and revenue. And I'll say to the chamber people, taxes, that requires that the defense spending never dip below the debt. And you can either spend one up or spend one down or do both. But that would create something that Graham Rudman Hollings did when it created its own kind of fiscal discipline. If I'm not mistaken, I think it was the trigger that forced President Bush 41 in the 1991 budget to raise taxes. So to me, it's an example of the vulnerability, and that data point is an example of our vulnerability. It's an example of our weakness. It's an example of that we're no longer disciplined, and it has historical precedents that can echo that we are a declining power. And if we address it, those our best days are not behind us, but they could be ahead of us.
Are we overextended around the world? I mean, right now we are treaty bound, whether it's through NATO, the Rio Treaty, the bilats across Asia, to defend a quarter of the world's population. Uh, is that sustainable?
Well, yes, that's so. Let me give you the invert. It is sustainable. It doesn't mean you don't alter the equities of that relationship. Our allies in Europe are now ready to spend. They should have done it a long time ago. They're as guilty as we are because we created that dependency. They're ready to spend on defense. They're ready to spend on research and development. And rather than walk away from that, we should encourage it so it becomes a new norm. Same thing in Asia. So now you say, should we pull back? There's a question. You pull back, just take a country like South Korea or Japan, they're going to say, okay, we're going to go nuclear. So that commitment by us brings non-proliferation. If you think that's expensive, wait till you see the price tag associated with proliferation. So it's not just a question of, oh, we're overextended. You can't be a superpower and have boundaries. You either are a superpower or you're not. Now, President Trump, President Xi, and President Putin agree with spheres of influence. I don't. I'm happy the United States is a world footprint and a power in the Middle East, and I'm happy Russia and China are not there. But maybe others think that they should be. I don't. I happen to think America is a force for good. I think when it looks to the Indo-Pacific, if the United States wasn't there, you'd have a lot more military confrontation with China beating up with smaller countries and economically, politically, and otherwise dominating them. I don't think that's a good idea. And I think it's dangerous to world peace because China has shown no interest in world peace or the goodness and the development of other countries. That's also true when you have what President Putin's doing. And this war starting in 2014 is only the first example. There's also what he's done in Georgia, what he's doing right now in the gray zone attacks in Europe. It would not be quiet if America pulled back. And we haven't even pulled back and you got a lot of noise. So are we overextended? I don't think so. And I think our allies are ready to step up because they've been living, President Trump is not wrong on this. They've been living cash free and credit free on the United States.
Yes.
We are as guilty as they are in creating that dependence. They have woken up to it. They're ready to step up. And this is not the time now that we finally have won the argument for us to pull back from. We may reconfigure the equities, but it's not this stupid choice between either all in or all out, which is how we're doing it.
All right, well, let me end on a question here from one of our members saying, are American companies doing enough to manage the risk posed by Chinese commercial espionage and coercion?
No,
And what should they be doing more of?
they're no disrespect. I love y'all. They're naive as hell. You got to understand this. Look, China, just take Google, stole from Google their AI. We are not stealing it from Yahweh. No American company is doing that.
Right.
China, which is a company, the country is a company, is in America's infrastructure network. If there ever came a kinetic moment to lock this country down, we are not in their network. Definitely not at the same capacity. Our cyber, our intellectual property, our investments in our intellectual creativity is bar none the best. And we are now in the midst of one of the worst on goals I've seen in American history.
Well, in defense of business, we all operate within the parameters set by the regulatory institutions of the country. And the regulatory message that we were getting from Washington over the years was that if we continue interacting with China, it was going to lead to a democracy. I mean,
no, let me go back on this one question. This always gets thrown into, oh, we made a mistake in the World Trade Organization. I don't actually think this is a 60-40 question. And what I mean by that is, was it smart to keep a country of that size and that capacity out rather than the old Lyndon Johnson in the tent pissing out rather than out pissing in? What was dumb in my mistake wasn't letting them in, was not enforcing when they were early on, not abiding by the rules they signed to. And then when 2012, when President Xi comes, and he changes from competitor to adversary, we didn't do anything. So the question wasn't getting in. The question is enforcement once getting in. And we basically became lackadaisical. In the same way that it wasn't a mistake when the Cold War ended, changing the G7 to the G8 and allowing President Putin, part of the G8, having Russia have a desk and operation inside NATO. Embracing was not a mistake. The mistake was that when President Putin basically in 2007 gave a speech at the Munich conference on security, declared basically war to the West, and we basically were naive for the next 20 years. Our naivety was the stupidity, not the strategic act.
All right. Well, we at the Chamber don't get involved in presidential politics, but we understand that you and your family have a difficult decision to make in the months ahead. We wish you the best of luck with that. For now, we deeply appreciate you joining us today, Rahm, and shedding light on this really important story. Your thoughts on this are invaluable.
Thanks very much.
Rahm Emanuel, former U.S. Ambassador to Japan, thank you so much. Our audience has gotten their shot of informational espresso and is ready to tackle the day. Missed a live episode? Catch the replay on our website, LinkedIn, or on YouTube. You can also listen to the call's podcast edition on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you to you, our members, for joining us. This has been The Call, brought to you by the Global Intelligence Desk, asking the right questions to navigate uncertain times.